Good evening, everyone. I Padmavati from Second NCOM. It is my pleasure to welcome you all to this exciting and informative webinar. Under the initiative of IQAC and Research Cell of St. Teresa's Degree College for Women in collaboration with SEMS Welfare Foundation, it is privileged to welcome you all for second day national level webinar on research skills and publication. Let's have a glimpse of yesterday's session, which was on the topic called Introduction to Research. We were able to enhance our knowledge on what is research, how to choose topic, and LSRW skills. And today we will be learning how to write a research paper and publish in recognized journals. I extend my warm welcome to our principal, Dr. Sister Prema, and a special heartfelt welcome to our resource person, Dr. N. Safrin Ma'am, Vice Principal and Organizing Team. I would like to formally welcome everyone. I request the resource person to take over this session. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Padmavi. Am I audible?
Yes,
Yes,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I'll start with the presentation right away. Okay, I hope my screen is also visible. So, very good evening to all the participants, and today we are in the second day session, and we'll be talking about how to write research paper and publish in recognized journals. That's the topic for today. This is the outline of any research paper, but there might be certain differences, but this is the basic standard components that will be present in any thesis. So any research paper will have an abstract. An abstract is like a short paragraph that gives you the gist of the entire paper, followed by introduction, the introduction to the research, literature review. Sometimes literature review will be interspersed with the introduction itself, or it might also come out as a separate subheading like background of the study. And then there's methodology. What is the method that is being used by the researcher to go ahead with this particular research paper? Then the results and analysis. What were the results? Yesterday we were talking about how to gather the data and how interpretation of data happens and how the analysis will happen. What is your finding? And the discussion will briefly touch upon the findings of the research, followed by a conclusion which will summarize all the findings of the research. And then towards the end, you will have references, meaning to say the bibliography that you've used, that is the sources that you have extensively referred, will be present in the bibliography section. And then in some cases, we will have a section called annexure if needed, where you would want to explain certain things. Sometimes if you see in a research paper, you'll also have footnotes because certain definitions or certain mentioning of names or dates will need an elaborate explanation, which can be put as a footnote. If not, it will be taken to the annexure part where the researcher will be giving in detail about all the things that he or she would want to explain, but wouldn't, really include it in the paper due to word limit issues. And also they might be very secondary to the main findings, right? So very rarely we come across this annexure, but mostly if it's a scientific paper, you will have a lot to explain. So these things are like pushed towards the end, the appendices or the annexures as we call. So now the whole idea of this presentation is to take you through each of the component, and then if time permits, I'm planning to show you a sample paper and what and all you can really do to enhance your paper, refine it properly so that you can publish it in a good journal and expect it to be accepted without, the possibility of being rejected. Let me start with the first component, abstract. So what is an abstract? If you see in any conference call out for papers, the first thing they would ask you is to submit an abstract, right? And the abstract is mostly like 250 to 300 or 400 words, nothing more than that. So you'll be asked to give 400 word write up with keywords. Keywords probably will be 4 to 5 keywords from the abstract itself. So this particular abstract will talk about what is your research aim and objective, what exactly you're going to do in your research paper. Probably it will also talk about the methodology that you will be using and what is the finding that you have come up with which has made your research paper special. Because remember, even in a conference, when they call out for papers, it's like going to be very competitive. And even in a journal, when you're going to submit, right? If you're going to target Scopus listed or Web of Science journals, it's highly competitive and you're sending out papers, everyone will be sending out. So if you want your paper to stand out and it has to softly and smoothly navigate through the peer review process and come out successfully, then definitely you need to have a strong research input inside your paper. So the first thing when you give is your abstract. So when the people read the abstract, they'll understand in short what your research is about. It's like putting in a nutshell. So make sure you nail it properly, so that once they read it, they will know your research paper is really going to carry the weight and really going to hold value. So it's short and well structured. Though it's very short, it has to be structured properly. And remember, it's like if you have written a 200-word PhD thesis, the abstract for it might be in a page, for a page. If it's going to be 10 to 15 page research article that you're writing and you're submitting to a journal, the abstract might be like what, maybe a paragraph or half a page. It's basically asking you to tell about your research briefly. And this is where the art of brevity comes in, right? So if you've performed the research, you've analyzed, you did everything. But if I'm going to ask you to tell about your research in 2 or 3 lines, will you be able to do? So that's when you need to cut short a lot. And that's when you need to decide what is the real core of your research that you actually want to present. So that's where the abstract plays an important role. So it outlines the most important points of the study, and then it tells you what is the key takeaway. It really throws light into the significant finding that you've made, and what can the reader expect? Is it worth their time? For example, why do you think research articles are in open access in many journals? Because it will be useful for scholars to go and access them, download them, and use it for their study. So when other scholars and other academicians are going and checking your paper, the first thing they will do is they'll only read your abstract. They won't sit and read the entire paper. Remember, I was telling about this yesterday when we were talking about skimming and scanning, right? So when they read the abstract, they will know that, okay, this research paper really has whatever I need. It's clearly communicating the content. So they'll be attracted to it, and they'll start reading your research paper, and they will start quoting from your research paper, which will improve the citation value. The more number of times your work is cited, people start quoting from your research paper, it will add value to your profile. And there is this tracker which will track how many people are citing from your paper. And that and all matters a lot to build up an extremely good academic profile. And then abstract also helps us to see the decision aid for researchers, for the sense like whether I can go ahead and read this person's paper. And it's a device for indexing, right? So the more your paper is getting attracted, the more your paper gains traction, the more number of citation increases for you as a researcher. And generally 300 to 500 words, not more than that. So in any conference, first the abstract is asked, they take the abstract, they scrutinize it, and if they're pleased with the abstract, they send you a letter saying your abstract is accepted, start preparing for your entire paper. So that's how usually all the conferences, roll out the call for papers. So the first impression that you make for your research paper is with your abstract. And I've put in some of the guidelines for the abstract, which will be very helpful. First thing, remember, clarity and brevity is very important because it has to be clear and concise, and main points have to be summarized neatly. The structure and content is very important. You start off with probably giving a line of introduction, everything to be just in a line. The line talking about your research finding aims, and a line about your methodology, and focusing on the important findings. And it has to be accurate, and clearly it should talk about what is the content of the research paper and the finding of your research. And then the target audience. So imagine whenever you write your research paper, you should understand whom are you writing for. Are you targeting your research paper to a specific group of intended audience, whether they are specialized in your field or they're general readers? It depends on the field that you are actually selecting to take forward your research. And then compliance with the guidelines. And sometimes, as I told you, in call for papers, they'll ask you the abstract should be only 300 words. Sometimes it's 350 words. So pay attention to the word limit and adhere to those guidelines so that your abstract won't be rejected. Because if it's going to be like only 50 papers that they want to accept and more than 100 of them are sending their abstract, there will be a very strong scrutiny that will happen at the initial stage. So you don't want your abstract to be rejected. You don't want to miss the chance to present your paper at a national or an international conference, which will again improve your profile. And, that's very important for a researcher. That's why I used to tell scholars who are doing their PhD or people who are working on any research, they should start publishing many papers, not just publish in journals alone, but also take part in conferences, which will help you to publish the work in journals. Because usually if you see these conferences, they have a tie-up with the journal publication houses, maybe with Taylor and Francis. That's a popular journal. Scopus listed journal, or with Springer, Nature, all these LC work. So these brands are like really good. They will get they will collaborate with these journal houses, and then they will form a conference theme, and then they'll call out for papers. So right from the beginning, if you are getting all these knacks, thoroughly, if you're able to follow these nuances properly, you will have high chances of smoothly, going through this journey of getting your paper published. So once it's done, you present it in a conference. At the same time, you can also try the conference proceedings will lead you to publish in a journal house also. This depends on whatever conference they're coming up. Sometimes it's with the UGC care listed journal. So they have different tie-ups, right? That you can check it out when the brochure comes and decide accordingly. But anything said and done, make sure the abstract is, drafted properly, because that's the first and foremost step. Once you begin that properly, once things are done in abstract, we can slowly start focusing on the complete paper. So what is the role of the abstract? Abstract gives the audience a bigger picture of the research. They don't need to read it fully. If they read that, it's enough for them to understand what is there in the abstract. And then it should stand strong on its own and sell your research. As I told you, it's like, I put an example here. It's like your shop front window. So when passers by go through, whatever they see in that, window only, it attracts them to the shop, right? Like a blurb on the book cover. So it's that thing your abstract does. It invites the readers to your article. It attracts the readers to your article and makes them to read the entire article and then use the article in their research, which is again going to be highly beneficial to you because of the citation. And also abstract are important because in search engines and journal databases, if they type the keyword, if the abstract has all those keywords, your article will start coming up in the database, and many scholars and many academicians will start accessing it. The whole idea of getting it published is not just for, yes, I got it published, but making it beneficial to the community of scholars and faculty members and academicians out there. So everyone should be able to access your article. Once it's published, it should be beneficial, it should be readable, it should be available and accessible to everyone. For that, these are the things that you have to follow, and you will know you're not only published, but you've also added value to this whole knowledge system of that particular field you're working on. So keywords of the abstract will be used. So if, for example, in your abstract, you'll be asked to give 5 keywords, which will actually be the important words that would, really form your research paper, the core of your research paper. So if someone wants to, for example, in your abstract, you've given the keyword as culture. So if someone types culture in the journal database, along with the other papers, even your papers will show up, because that's one keyword that you've used. So again, other scholars and people searching for papers related to culture, related theories or things like that will be able to have access to your paper. So keyword is very important. How to write the abstract? Have the context in place, establish the context in a sentence. So the whole challenge here is you have 10 or 15 pages, or you have 5 to 10 pages of a research article. Pull out the important information and make sure that is present in the abstract. And also have this in mind. Why should audience care about your work? Because it's an ad for your work. It's an advertisement for your work. So make sure you give the important elements and take the audience attention towards your work. Define the research problem in 2 sentences. What is the problem that you're going to tackle in the research paper? Talk about that in the abstract. Mention the methodology that you'll be using, whether it's quantitative, qualitative, or mixed. And mention the key findings. What was the finding? What did you really find out after you carried out this research? That should be reflected in 2 sentences, along with the research implication, how it's become beneficial, or what you really came up and why this paper holds value. And then you complete it with 3 to 5 keywords. Usually they ask for 5 keywords or 3, depending on the requirement of the journal. So what are the common mistakes that can happen while you draft a abstract? Not understanding exactly what an abstract is. Some people are like, they just think it's just a summary of the entire paper, and what they do is they just copy paste one part of the paper and then say this is the abstract. I've seen scholars doing this when I used to review papers for as a part of my editorial workload. I used to review papers. If I see the abstract, it'll be the same paragraph which is there in the research paper, which is just not accepted. It's a blunder, right? You can't just copy paste one part of your paper and say this is my abstract. You see the steps that I was walking you through from the beginning, right? It involves little steps are needed, step by step following the rules is important, because if these steps are missed out, it really impacts the overall quality of the paper. And these days, somehow I feel young scholars are not really having time to pay attention to these nuances. And that's why I keep emphasizing all this, and I take it right from the beginning, right from the scratch, from topic selection, because these are all topics like which is not really given importance when it comes to academic writing. In neglecting all this, we can't straight away go and say you start writing your research paper. There's so much of work that needs to be done behind the scene work. This is really important, and then only everything will fall in place in your research paper. So you can't copy paste your paragraph of your research paper in the abstract. It has to have what are the things that I had mentioned earlier, right? This all has to be there: the research problem, the methods, the findings, and the research implications. Again, failing to cover the key aspect. The main idea of the abstract is it should reflect on the key aspect, key findings of the research paper, and have to format it properly. Mostly the research paper formats would be Times New Roman, 12-point font size, and 1.5 double spacing, or 2, mostly 1.5 that I've been seeing, for some time. Earlier it was 2. But remember, each journal varies, they have a different requirement. So you can go through that and format it accordingly. And your language should be proper, it should be clear. And if you don't include keywords also, the abstract loses its value. So that's another important thing. You can't forget to do that. So these are the things you need to have in mind to ensure you get your abstract drafted properly. Yeah, this is one statement I put here. Place your abstract first, but write its content at the end. So meaning to say that any research paper, abstract will be placed in the first, following which the full paper actually starts with the introduction. But what you really do is you don't write the abstract first, right? Because you won't know what the research paper will be carrying. You'll only be writing the entire paper first. You'll complete the paper, and then only you will start writing the abstract, because you won't know what are the important contents or the methodology or the aims, whatever components within the abstract will be clear to you only when you finish the paper. So complete your paper and then sit down to write a proper abstract. Read the paper maybe a couple of times or more than that to get a clear view. And probably in your copy, you can even highlight what is the important line in your paper. What are the important, your uniqueness I was talking about yesterday, right? The way to highlight your, unique findings. So make sure you get important points highlighted in your content and ensure that it goes into the abstract some way or the other. Rephrase it and write it. So that will do for the abstract. Now let's move to the introduction chapter. So now when you're actually writing the chapter, you're getting to the writing part of it, you will have a title. Title can also be worked out at the last, because title and abstract and all, though they come at the beginning, it's better you work at it at the end so that you will have a clear view. You are immersed into the research, you're done with it, and you have a very, very clear idea as to what are the things that should go into your title, what are the words that should go into your title, how to make it clear, and what should go into your abstract. So you will do that at the end. By the time you are very thorough, you have a comprehensive view about your research, and you've done a lot of references and reading as well. Now, starting with the introduction chapter. What is introduction? Generally, what is introduction? It basically introduces you to something, right? So you have your readers in mind when you write your research paper. Remember, you're not just writing and just publishing, it's done. People are going to read the research paper. If it's a PhD thesis, examiners are going to read and they're going to give their comments, and a lot of process will happen and many scrutiny will happen. But otherwise, if it's a normal research paper that you want to write and get it published in a good quality journal also, many people are going to read it. It's not just the editor, it might be the assistant editor, it might be the peer reviewer, section editor. So you will have around 4 to 5 people reading it. We call this the peer review process, where your paper will be sent to 3 to 4 reviewers, or even two or 3, or sometimes 4. It will be sent to these many reviewers. The reviews panel will go through it. Each one will be giving their comments, and each one will be suggesting revisions to the paper. So imagine, at that stage, how many people are reading it. Only after going through all the stages will your paper be accepted and will go live on the website, and people will start accessing the paper. That will go to public. In the sense, everyone will be able to read. But even before you go to that stage, you have editors and reviewers going through it. Not just going through it, they will scrutinize it line by line. They'll check for content, for everything. I'll be talking about that towards the end of the session as well. So remember, these are the audience. So your editors, your reviewers are experts in your field. You'll be sending your paper to a journal which is publishing papers related to your field, right? So these people who are in the editorial board, are highly educated and they are experts in this field. They know everything and they will be looking out for mistakes, or they'll be, really asking a lot of questions, and you should be ready to go through that process. But if you're going to enhance in your research paper, you're going to be very mindful of these little things that go through your paper. There are high chances that you can avoid the rejection rate. So let's come back to the introduction chapter. Introduction will give you overview of your planned research. What is your research about and why are you conducting it? As simple as that. So, have the audience in mind, have the editors, the reviewers who are going to read, any third person who's going to read. When he or she reads that introduction, they should understand that it's going to be a general description of what the chapter is going to be and why this research has actually happened. What is the need to carry out the research? And then introduce your readers to your research slowly. After you answer that what and why, take them through the research, the main area of the research. And in your introduction also, you will talk about your aims and objectives. What is the purpose? What is the aim? What is the objective of your research? And definitely here, you will highlight the research gap. Why are you actually conducting the research? If I ask you that, you should be able to justify, because there is a gap in literature. What do you mean by research gap? I'll be taking you through that in the next slide. So you must have heard this term whenever scholarly discussion happens, whenever, I discuss with my scholars, or also I've seen in multiple discussion forums. When we are talking about research, the whole thing rests on one question. Why is this research needed now? Why do you want to do this research? Why did you select this topic? So everywhere as a researcher, you'll be asked to justify, you'll be asked to give answers to these questions. And as I told you earlier, before answering these questions to others, they're going to answer, they're going to ask you, that's for sure. You ask these questions to yourself and ensure you have valuable answers, you have justifying answers for that. Once you can answer yourself these questions, you'll boldly be able to give them the answers, the justification that's needed. So let's come back to what is research gap. This is an unanswered question or an unresolved problem in a field where there is a lack of established knowledge. So there is a problem which is not being addressed, and there's a question which is not being answered. It's unanswered. It's still unknown. It's yet to be explored. So this is the whole idea of research gap. And that's what is attracting you to that whole area of research, right? Because it's not being noticed, because it does not come to the spotlight, it has not been answered. That's why you are going to work on it. You probably have an aim to work on it and come out with answers and share it with the public and add to the ken or the knowledge system. A gap also exists when there is a fair deal of existing research. Sometimes there will be existing research, but the findings of the research, are strewn in different directions, making it difficult to draw firm conclusions. For example, if there is one problem, there might be many answers many researchers are giving. Or, for example, imagine there is this disease and it's found out it's caused by smoking. Maybe 90% of the research papers or the research findings say that yes, it's because of smoking, but 10% is saying no, it's not because of smoking. So if you see, there is this contradiction that's really happening in that stage. And as a researcher, I would want to know why that 10% is not accepting this. So every research, the answers won't be like 100% complete. There will be some issues, some difficulties. Remember, I was talking about the limitations of research also. So every research has a limitation, and these limitations give way for a research gap. And that research gap gives way for a further research to happen. In that way, if you see, it's very cyclical. So you need to find out where the research gap lies in and how you're going to address it. For this, you're going to read a lot. Literature review will only give you the enough resources. It will help you to find out what is already being done and what is yet to be done and what are you going to do. Remember these three things. What is already being done? So you read a lot of text, you'll understand. A lot of materials you come up with, you understand. What is not done, you're going to question that. Why this is not done? And what are you going to do? How are you going to bridge the gap is very important. So what are the four types of, I've put here this research gap is the birthplace of research topics. So yesterday we were extensively discussing about the topic selection, right? It has to be original, it has to be new. Only if your research gap is strong, you know that there is this lack of knowledge. You will come up with a stronger topic and you can justify saying that, yes, I'm doing this because there is lack of knowledge in this. Or there is knowledge here, there is a lot of resource done, but I'm seeing it in a different perspective. That is, you are coming up with something new. As I put the quote by Albert, people are seeing the same thing, but they're not thinking the same thing. So you are seeing the same thing happening, or you are encountering that knowledge, but your thoughts towards it, your perspective towards this is completely different. And that's where the new innovative angle starts coming up, and you will start continuing your research. So this is very important, and it gives you ideas for good topic research gap. And then four types of research gap that you just have to have in mind. First one is classic literature gap, or just simply put, literature gap. Literature gap is, you can say that most of the works are not being done on this particular topic. This particular element of a broader topic that you've taken is completely neglected. Why so? Why is it being marginalized? So you will start thinking about it. There is a disagreement gap where certain findings don't agree. As I told you, maybe 50% findings are saying positive results, 50% are giving out negative results. There is a contradiction there, and there is a disagreement there. So you want to find out why there's a lot of variation. And then contextual gap, the context established in that knowledge in that particular field is not proper. You feel that there is something lacking there. Maybe there's a strong research focus lacking there, and you would want to work on it. And methodological gap, why certain methods are not used here. Probably you think one research has to use a qualitative method or a quantitative method, but it's using a mixed method. So there is some discrepancies when it comes to methods used. So then we can say it's a methodological gap. But overall, put all four together, one thing that should answer your question for a research gap is what is missing. It's like a missing piece in a puzzle. And when you find it, you put it the completion, or you give it a wholesome view. So that's very important. And then it also comes as a result of strengthening your literature review. As I told you, only when your literature review is strengthened, that is how much of resources that you keep reading related to your topic. How do you stay updated upfront with whatever publications are related to your area of research? That will only strengthen your idea of research gap, because the more you read, you'll be able to identify what is missing, right? You can't find out, like, just reading after two or three research papers, you can't draw to a conclusion, you can't jump to a conclusion. You'll be able to give a comprehensive analysis, you'll be able to have a proper stand only when you read. Probably about, it takes time, even after sometimes after 6 months of collecting resources and reading them, still you would be searching for the research gap. It's fine, sometimes it even takes a year for a PhD research I'm talking about. But if it's going to be a short term research paper that we are focusing on, you can quickly, take 10 to 15 papers at hand, like a sampling, and you can see what is really missing in that particular area that's being focused, and pick out that. And again, you can take a lot of expert help. Other than literature review, also you have certain methods that you can follow, but literature review is very important. It is the core. Let's go to the introduction part that I was talking about. We started with the introduction chapter. So in your introduction, these are the essential ingredients, the components that you should be focusing on. The first is the opening section. The opening section is nothing but a very brief introduction to your research, where you will introduce the reader to your research, and then the background of the study. What did you actually go through, or you're situating your research through the entire research paper, right? So you will explain the context of your project there. How are you, context of your research project? Where are you really placing your study in? For example, if I'm going to talk about any Indian writing that I'm picked up, I can generally talk about Indian literature, and within that background, how I've picked up this topic, where do I place this author? So like this, within the broader area, how did you narrow down? We were talking about that also yesterday, right? So probably you can reflect on the broader area and see how your niche area is located within the broader area, within that whole umbrella term, I could say. Where do you really where do you really locate your work? Then the research problem. The research problem slash the research questions are the things that needs to be addressed, needs to find answer for that, right? So here you will explain the gap that exists in the current research. By the time you finish the paper, you know what exactly is the research gap that is made you to take up this research. So address that there. And then talk about your aims, objectives, and questions. That is, what is the aim of the research paper? What does it attempt to do? And what are the questions it attempts to address? This has to be clearly stated. And then the significance or the justification as to why your research is worth doing, and the value it will provide to the world. That is to justify why you have actually taken your time and effort and you have done this. And then the limitations. Sometimes limitations are mentioned towards the end, and sometimes it's put in the conclusion part. and sometimes it's included in the introduction part itself. That is to say, you will acknowledge the limitations, like what are the, or maybe you can say that this particular research only focuses on the mental health of youngsters from this year to this year. You are not taking the entire year. You are having only certain time period that you're focusing. So these might be a little limitations that accompany your research, right? Or probably some difficulties that you have faced while carrying out the research. Usually comes with the conclusion, but it can be included in the introduction also. And then you will give an overall outline for the structure of your research paper. This will orient the readers, because towards the end of the introduction chapter, each para or each line should talk about what will each chapter say. See, for example, I think I've put it in that slide here where we'll be talking about, I think it will come. So in chapter 1, what and all we'll be talking about. In chapter 2, what are the things we'll be focusing about. So it's like a mini index to your entire research paper. So in case if your research paper is not a thesis, right, it's not going to have chapters, you really need not mention this at all, because immediately the next section will follow up with the literature review or methodology. It's understood. You need not actually mention if it's a short research paper. Only when it's a thesis, we'll be talking about the chapters which are inside the thesis. Now, this is one example that I've put here for the opening section. So here, this particular research paper talks about organization skill development as an essential contribution to business growth. So see how it's opening. It says organization skills development involves identifying current or potential skill gaps within a business and developing programs to resolve these gaps. And then within that organization skill development, it talks about management research, that's including the elements there, X, Y, Z, has clearly established organization skill development as an essential contributor. So the importance, the significance of organization skill is mentioned. So this is like the basic opening or the introduction that's given. And then a sentence introducing your specific research problem. Now you can throw light on what is the actual problem. However, can you hear me? I hope I'm audible.
Yes, ma'am, you're audible.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, thank you. However, there are conflicting views and overall lack of research. So can you see those terms there, right? So the moment I introduce the word however, you know that I'm pointing out to some problems, right? So there is some conflicting view, overall lack of research, and regarding how to manage skills. So what exactly is the problem I'm trying to throw light on? So first I open the section with a general introduction, then I take to the problem, I throw light on the problem, and then I move on to the aims and objectives. Actually, all this put together will be coming to a para or plus. This you can expand, right? I've just taken an example, not a detailed example, but you can keep expanding on it. Your research aims and objectives can go more than like what a paragraph, obviously. So the research aims to identify. So what is exactly the aim of this research is to identify and evaluate skill development approaches and strategies for highly dynamic industries in which subject knowledge is continuously evolving. So here you see the aims are clearly communicated, following which there is an outlining detail. So a sentence outlining the layout of the chapter. So the chapter will be providing introduction to the study. So the first, you are orienting the readers towards reading the research paper. It will provide an introduction to the study by first discussing the background and context. So what exactly my study is planning to do, that structural orientation is given here. And followed by the research problem, aims, objectives, and finally the limitations. Now, what is the thing that you will focus when it comes to background of your study? The background has to be included in the introduction part, as I told you. So you need to write this section with the assumption that the reader is not an expert in your topic area. See, for example, sometimes you are writing about a specific field where you consider yourself to be interested in. By the time you finish your research, you find yourself to be a little bit of expert in that because you've read a lot, you've reflected a lot. But then when you publish a research paper, though you might think that there are specific audiences to it, but there are times general audience also get a chance to read that. So ensure that if you're using any complex jargons or terminologies, you should briefly explain it so that anyone who reads your research paper, other than specialized audiences who have the beforehand knowledge of your area of interest, a layman should also be able to understand, to put it in simple terms. So in case if you're using those complex terminologies, ensure that you a little bit explain about it so that it won't be a hindrance to people who are, completely new to that particular area of interest. Something, we have many different streams of knowledge. We have engineering, we have sciences, we have arts, it's like education is diversified. But a good researcher, for example, I'm from arts, I'm from literature, right? Imagine my research paper, if it's going to be read by someone who's done pure science, someone who maybe who is even a scientist. So if I'm going to use literary theories and concepts without actually explaining, again, even if he's a great scientist, he might not understand unless he has to go and refer to any sources and take the help of Google or something, and then he or she has to understand. But a good spirit of a researcher lies in simplifying things. Even if I'm using a terminology, if I explain it, I should make sure that anyone who picks my paper, even if it's a scientist or even if it's someone from other different fields of education, though I am from literature, he or she should be able to understand it. Same way, even if it's for a science paper, when we are in arts, we don't know any complex terms related to science. If I'm able to pick up that paper and I'm still able to understand what the researcher is saying, the success lies there because you've communicated efficiently, and that's more important. Research is nothing but communicating your findings efficiently and effectively. So ensure that the terminologies are being explained, keeping a general audience in mind, and don't make any assumptions about the reader's knowledge. Don't think that they might know everything. Sometimes they may not know even the basics. Make sure you have explanation given to everything in case if you think that's a complex idea that you're discussing. Then the research problem has to be included in the introduction session. We have discussed what a research problem is when there's a need to answer a question or a set of questions, but there's a gap. And that's why we call it as a research problem, right? So when you present your research problem, you need to make it clear what exactly the questions that you're going to answer. So these are the questions that I've put so that you can, easily get your framing done. What's already well established in the literature, what is already done, the current state of research, what's missing, that is the missing piece in a puzzle. Remember that. That is the literature gap or the research gap, and why this is a problem. Just because this is missing, just because this is a gap, is it a problem? Do you think this problem needs to be addressed? Ensure that you have answers for this and carry forward this answer in your introduction session. Organize. I put another paragraph here where this paragraph explains what's already well established in literature, right? So if you see this, organization skill development is critically important for employee satisfaction and company performance. Numerous studies have investigated strategies and approaches to manage skill development programs within an organization. So if you see, all this is already there, right? It's a reference that I'm making to the studies I've told or earlier research has been done. This is kind of a literature review that I'm putting it in. Again, note the term however. So when however comes, be ready. There is going to be a conflict. There is going to be a turn in the content because you're going to really focus on what is missing. However, these studies are only traditionally focused and right where key skills and knowledge do not change particularly often. But here in the website development industry, which they'll be talking about towards the end, that the need to study the website development industry is important because this is what is actually telling us what is missing from the literature review. Earlier, whatever has been studied, whatever has been represented comes out. Yes, that's fine. But what is really missing? What has the earlier study or the established knowledge has failed to cover is what we are really focusing on as a part of literature gap. Next, this particular paragraph, if you see why this research gap is a problem and why it needs to be addressed. So it's saying as a result, the existing research is inadequate. So use the words. Can you see the words being used? I'll also take you through the different academic phrases that you can use when you are writing these chapters. I've included that also. So it says the existing research is inadequate for industries because the knowledge and skills are constantly changing and evolving. So industries in such environments find themselves ill-equipped because they are not constantly putting themselves up, keeping on par with the evolving knowledge and the knowledge system that's constantly evolving. There is a regression. They are not able to progress ahead. So this particular paragraph talks about why the research is not sufficient, what has to be done, and why this particular research is going to hold value. So the research aims, objectives, and questions are also brought inside the introduction topic. So here you see this particular paragraph that I put in quotes. Given the lack of research regarding organization skills, so we are talking about organization skills development, right? From the beginning, that's the thing that I've taken as an example. In fast moving industries, the study will aim to identify. So you can clearly see the words, the phrase they study will aim. The aim is brought out and the approach is the aim to identify and evaluate the skills development approach. So you can see in this example, the aim is clearly outlined, specific context in which the research will be undertaken. So it is the web development companies in UK. So the whole idea is to study the skill developments related to web development companies in UK. So that is also clearly mentioned. It's becoming more specific as it communicates the aims and objectives. So now your research questions should directly relate to your research objectives. So what are your objectives? Your questions will be related to that. So for example, I put 3 questions here related to this particular topic. What skill development strategies and approaches are currently used in UK pertaining to web development companies? How effective are each of these strategies and approaches? And what are the strength and weakness of each approach? So this is what I'm going to look into. So when I say I'm going to talk about the development websites there, development approaches by development companies in UK. These are the 3 questions. And this is directly related to the objectives of my study. The objective is what we checked out, right? The objective is to study the entire the web development companies approaches in UK. The questions will also automatically be related to that. So now that you've made clear that you'll be researching, it's time to make your argument strong. Making argument strong is justifying or throwing light on the significance of your research. In other words, you're just trying to explain why your research is going to make a difference and what impact it's going to have on the society. Yesterday, you remember I was telling a good research should be beneficial to the society. It's targeting or aiming to add value, add knowledge. How do you think your research will be beneficial? See, I'm from a literature background. So now I write about an author and I get it published. I write a research paper connecting certain literary ideas, theories, and I publish it. Do you think it's what kind of impact it's going to bring to the society? Probably I will be throwing light on some concepts which people in literary field haven't focused on. And reading my paper, many fellow scholars can use it for their future study. They can cite my papers. This is how it's going to benefit the people out there, right? The academicians and experts and whoever wants to refer my paper related to that particular area that I focused on. And this is what I mean by how it impacts the society. The limitations. So limitation is something that you have to have in mind. Any research paper is not 100% perfect. It's bound to have certain limitations. In the sense, it can be even the difficulties you face. Sometimes while collecting data, you might have faced certain difficulties. You should be clear about that, and you should be able to mention that in your research paper. Mostly in the introduction itself, you can say like this was the limitation, so you couldn't get data after this point of time. So this is accepted, it's fine. Limitations are there, it's fine. And you need to recognize what is the limitation and completely be transparent about that and express it in your research paper so that future researchers, potential scholars will be able to pick it up in future. They'll be aware of it and probably they can use it as an element to improve their study design when they are going with the research, because it will be like a caveat, it will be like a alert system for the people who are taking up your research so that they can look into the limitations and they can make themselves be prepared for the difficulties that they might face if they go in the research direction that you have gone. See, remember, research is a journey. I keep saying it's an intellectual journey. You travel the journey, you complete it successfully once you publish the paper. But the difficulties you will have in any journey, there's a difficulty, right? Even when you go for I'm talking about a real journey. If you visit any place, you'll have a lot of pleasant memories to say. But here and there might be some negative experiences, right? If I say 100% it was positive, there must be something, like at least one or two very minor experiences you can say has not turned out very well. So that's what is your limitation, right? Although the entire journey is beautiful, you might relate to it as something memorable, something that you cherish. But there might be a couple of incidents which might have made it difficult for you. And remember, that's what limitations are for a research. And when someone wants to go to the same place again, they come and ask you, you have visited that place. You tell them, yes, it was good. I did this, all this, what and all can be done. And you also, give a caution about this, right? If you have had a bad experience here and there in a particular hotel or in a particular restaurant or in traveling and all, you will alert them, right? Saying that, be careful. These are the things were a little problematic. When you go, ensure that you don't go to that particular hotel or you don't taste food in that particular restaurant. You give them this caution. Same way, your limitation is going to do that for the fellow researchers. So they'll be cautioned as to, what can be done to move away from that particular danger zone, so as to say. Next, the structural outline. This is very important because when it comes to a PhD thesis level, where you will give a roadmap to what you can really expect as a structure. So for a PhD research, it's going to be like 200 pages with 5 chapters. So in this section, we are telling what each chapter will do. So it's very important to take the readers through each chapter, maybe 2 or 3 lines, briefly talking about, giving details about what each chapter is. And that's the structural outline. So once the reader reads it, he or she will be, by the time the reader is done with the introduction section of your research paper, he or she will be prepared to approach the research article. They'll know what is the plan that you have communicated and they'll be mentally prepared to read the article. So, for example, chapter one, the context of the study has been introduced. In chapter two, existing literature has been reviewed. In chapter three, methodological choices will be explored. So, they are having an idea as to what each chapter will do before they start actually reading the main chapter. This is mostly applicable for thesis. For a normal research paper, you won't have all these sections, right? Because it's very short when compared to a thesis publication. Now, let's move to literature review. We have been talking about it quite often. We know it's very important when it comes to research gap. So, what does literature review do? It helps you to understand the current literary trends. You go through the lot of research papers. You get yourself equipped with the current trend in your particular area of research. For example, I'm going to do research about Indian women writers who are writing maybe from a tribal community and all. I will start reading all research papers which was published recently, maybe to understand what is the level of research that's happening in that particular area. Like this, all of you will have different field of interest. So start reading and keeping yourself updated to know that you can generally reflect on the pattern of the research that is happening related to your field. So you can search Google Scholar. Google Scholar is really good. If you type out the keywords, you get all the articles related to your research, and also it shows you the number of citations for each article. So highly cited articles are very credible, they are trustworthy. Many of them have read it, many scholars have cited it, so you can use it as a important material for your research. So assess an old topic with a new unique concept. So sometimes if you are even approaching an old topic for your research, but you have a new concept in mind, it's going to work out, because probably this was an old topic that was handled in a different way, but now you are bringing a new concept or theory to it, so there's a fresh perspective in hand. So have these things in mind when you do a literature review. So what is the purpose of literature review? This is something that you will keep hearing whenever you are going to any research workshop, or whenever you are asked to train yourself to write a research paper. Literature review is a term that you'll keep hearing a lot. So literature review, the main purpose is to enable a comprehensive understanding, help you to dwell deeper into the existing research. It's not enough that you just read few papers. As I told you, probably the last 5 years what has been published. If you're doing any analysis related to, for example, in psychology, if they're going to come up with topics where they'll be analyzing the mental health of students, for mental health of youth, how it's been impacted by factors like social media, maybe the recent 5 years or even 10 years back, if they're going to start, they can see there's a drastic change, right? Because maybe 10 years back, the technology advances were not that great as it was now. Maybe now it's AI driven completely. So maybe 5 years back, it was not that much AI. So there will be a difference in the pattern, there'll be a difference in the results and findings. And this is where you have to be very careful in assessing the trends. And also, it gives you critical, it helps you to develop critical and analytical thinking. And this is one of the important skills for any researcher. A researcher doesn't take anything as and when it comes their way. Even if they're going to read a research paper, they're going to ask a lot of questions in that paper. Why this author has not focused on this, or why too much of focus is given on this. So you need to develop a critical spirit, I would tell you. Analyze everything, engage critically with all the topics, all the elements in your research. Engaging critically is questioning a lot and trying to find the answers, and that is what is going to take you to unexplored areas. So engaging with a wide range of literature hones your critical thinking and analytical skills, and also it broadens your perspective. Probably when you started the research, right from your topic selection, I was walking you through yesterday, right, stage by stage, maybe when you started you had one perspective, but as you kept reading a lot of materials, your perspectives will broaden. Obviously, you will come across other new elements also, and that's when you remember, I told you yesterday, you should be open to new ideas, you should be open to changes which can be used to tweak your research ideas. Then I can share my own experience. When I started, I had like 2 3 authors in mind, but when I kept doing a lot of literature review for more than 6 months, I decided I had to drop one of them, because all the three that I've selected, this one author didn't align with my idea of the theory that I was using. It wasn't aligning. The person's work was not aligning with that. I didn't realize it earlier, right? Because when I started, probably I did research, but then the more I read, the more I kept myself connected with the current research, I understood that this will not work out. So this is where my perspective was broadening, and I was looking into other ways of including another author, and a bit of changes were made in that journey, and before finally I could publish my thesis. So that's very important. Your perspectives can change. You will be exposed to diverse viewpoints and methodologies, and this will expand the perspective you have on the entire topic itself. And who knows, sometimes you will come up with surprising elements. You'll stumble upon completely new findings which people have not noticed so far, which has not received scholarly attention, and you can take it. It's like unearthing, and you can take that out and use it in your research, and that will completely come out with something, an outstanding research as well. So that and all are moments of joy for a researcher, finding out something no one knows as we go through. It's like mining. It's like a treasure hunt, I would say. Literature reviews, you might, obviously you'll come up with a lot of information. Sometimes it's like weeds, won't be useful to you, it won't be fruitful, but sometimes you will also unearth treasure. So that's what is really the journey in literature review would be. And also it flexibility and accessibility. So you will start being more flexible. You'll be open to new ideas as you keep a lot track of all the materials, and this will help you to enhance the value of your research. And accessibility of data also. The more you read, the more you access the data, the more you come across many information. And again, all this will help you at the same time, this will also put you in a lot of trouble situation, because you need to organize a lot. The more you read, the more you get to know that there's a lot of organization, there's a lot of skepticism would come, and you'll doubt few things, you'll have to ask questions. But this is a part and parcel of what a researcher will go through. But the idea is to make sure you gain knowledge, you are able to question, you are able to critically approach those research papers, not just blindly copy paste or use it or paraphrase it in your research, but be able to understand, give your own voice to that particular issue that is being discussed. So the steps in crafting a literature review: define a clear and focused research question, develop a comprehensive research strategy. So you must have the research question in mind. You will have it by this time you have stated everything in your mind. And have a proper search strategy where you will go to journal databases and search for the materials, screen and select the materials systematically. And once you get all the materials, try to extract and organize whatever is needed alone. Remember the skimming and scanning part that I was talking about. This will all going to help you a lot in identifying what you really need. You might not need everything of a research paper, or in a book, you might need only a few topics or few chapters, which will help you. So go according to that. Cull out the important information, whichever is making sense, whichever is needed. Synthesize and analyze the findings. Once you come up with, for if I read a research paper of 20 pages, I'll come up with probably a paragraph which will say, this is what I understood out of this research paper. Usually what I do is, with all my materials that I collect, it's in a PDF format. I used to put a lot of comments on the side and reflect on what the author is talking about. And also, once I read the research paper, before I go to the second one, I'll prepare notes for it. So that, because once I read the second one, I might tend to forget the important points discussed in the first one. So it's better you prepare notes, you have summary notes for every material that you're reading, so that you will know the gist of the things that is being discussed there. This will greatly help you for your literature review writing. And then the findings are interpreted and draw conclusion. In the sense, for example, I read 10 research papers, I'll slowly understand what is the pattern that's being discussed, and I will start writing down, and I'll say, okay, most of the researchers are focusing only on this element when it comes to this particular problem. Why this element is only focused? What happened to the other elements? I'll start raising questions. And this is where my critical and analytical skill actually comes into play. Then comes research methodology. Research methodology determines how you will answer your research questions, how you're going to do it, and how you're going to collect your information, who or where will you go to collect your data from, and how to collect the data and analyze it. So these are the things that you have to have in mind when you're talking about research methodology. Research methodology, mostly it has three types: quantitative, qualitative, and mixed. Quantitative deals with numbers. Remember quantity. Qualitative, quality, it is focusing on ideas, words, phrases, and concepts. So if I do a research related to literature, it comes under qualitative, right? I'll be discussing critical theories, I'll be discussing literary concepts, that and all comes under qualitative. But if I'm doing very scientific research, I'll deal with a lot of numbers, right? That's quantitative. Sometimes the research will combine both quantitative and both qualitative, and that's called mixed, where both the types are combined. So like some examples of qualitative methods are interviews, focus groups, document analysis, ethnography. So I can conduct interviews with experts, with focus group people. I have participants who can take part in that and give me the necessary data. Document analysis, I have a lot of magazine articles and all resources that I can read and analyze. Ethnography is probably I have select a particular set of people with whom I can travel and understand their lifestyle. I was talking about this example yesterday about how people stay with a group of people to understand their culture. The researcher will literally stay with them, for example, tribal understanding tribal literature, tribal lifestyle. You do that. That's called ethnographic. So this is some of the example for qualitative. And quantitative, mostly surveys, because surveys deals with numbers. Once you get the results after conducting your surveys and measurements, you put them in bar graphs, pie charts, and then you communicate in terms of numbers, saying that 100%, if you're going to communicate, you can say 70% of these young people are getting impacted by this particular social media platform. So you come up with numbers. You conclude with numbers after you conduct your surveys and other measurements that you have to do. So basically, this deals with numbers. Next, why is research methodology important? What it actually carries? It's important because it reflects on the research questions and problems that you're aiming to address. So depending on your research problem or your aim, you should come up with a relevant approach, whether it's quantitative, qualitative, or mixed. And select the data collection methods. As I told you, you have a lot of options: surveys, interviews, experiments, document analysis. Sometimes you can use two out of it or three methods out of it. It depends, like which one will align with your research design, which one you think is which is the best way to gather data. So probably you can reflect on this, take help of your mentors or experts in this field, and then decide which methodology will be helpful. Once it's done, you can start conducting the research methodology, and then the methodology in the sense whether it's qualitative or quantitative, and whatever data you get, you can start analyzing that. And from that, you will draw conclusion. Remember the ethical considerations in research methodology. I've told this yesterday also. So if you are, having set of participants who are going to help you out in the research, they want to maintain their confidentiality. They don't want to reveal their names or gender for some specific reason. Ensure that you follow this ethics. Okay. For example, this happens in ethnographical research. I was talking about anthropology. Remember, anthropology is where you study behavioral sciences, behavior of human beings. So if I'm going to study a particular culture, maybe there are certain sensitive elements in that culture and people don't want to reveal that to a researcher, or they don't want to reveal certain information related to that particular aspect. So they're sensitive to that. So as a researcher, you should also develop that sensitivity, and you should follow that ethics. If they ask you not to reveal their names in the research, don't do that. Just maintain the confidentiality. This is ethics for a good researcher. And yeah, how it all fits together. So introduction answers the what of the research, literature review, what already exists, and why your finding is important or why your perspective is important. And research methodology is how. The what, how, why. Just get those things right. You will have the background set right. And then comes the title. Title is very important. Like your abstract, it's another thing that's going to attract the readers. So a strong title needs to be of three things. That is, like, it should be clear and concise. You can't have a very lengthy title like a paragraph length, or it's like running more than 2 lines or 3 lines unless it's necessary. Otherwise it will look very lengthy, and it's better if it's small and it's communicating the essential elements. Be specific. There should not be any ambiguity or vagueness portrayed in the title, and it should represent the research that you're undertaking. Probably it's good if you're connected with the research question, because we know what is the thing that you're really planning to address. So a good title will focus on the broader area, the overarching topic you're focusing under the broader area, to talk about the specific focus that you are going to take forward in the research. And then it might also give an indication of the research design. Research design is nothing but research methodology, whether it's quantitative, qualitative, or mixed. So here there's one title that's put here, if you see. So this is the title: a quantitative investigation into the antecedents of organizational trust in the UK retail forex trading market. So quantitative investigation talks about the methodology, the design, and broader area is the organizational trust that they are focusing on. And within that, they're just going to focus on retail forex trading market. So better that all these things come up. So not every time it works out the way like this, but good that these essential elements are portrayed in the title so that it becomes clear to the people who are approaching your research paper. And then finally comes the conclusion chapter. So by the time you come to the conclusion, you're done with the findings, you're done with the discussions, everything is in place. So one of the important factors of conclusion chapter is to synthesize all the major points, summarize all the major findings of your study, And basically it offers the key takeaways from your research work. What you tell them what you've found, why it's valuable, how it can be applied, and what further research can be done. And that's how you make it very brief, at the same time make it more essential as well. So what are the important components of conclusion? Summarizes the key finding of the study. It explicitly answers the research questions and addresses the research aims, because you started off with the questions in your research introduction, right? In your introduction part, you are discussing about the question. By the time you come to the conclusion, you have answers for that. Inform the readers of the study's main contribution. So why the study is important and how it's going to contribute to this particular field is something that you will put across. And then discuss any limitations. Again, even in the introduction, you are discussing. If you have not discussed in the introduction, you can talk about it in the conclusion part. Present recommendation. So once you finish with all this, there's something called recommendations that you'll make for future research. Any research doesn't stop. It's always open for further possibilities to be continued with the research. And that's what a good research is. So for example, I am performing a research, I come up with certain findings, I conclude and I put a full stop. Later, maybe after 2 years or 5 years, even after 10, 15 years, another scholar can come up with, continue with this research by taking my findings as a core basis, and they can take my findings and they can start building their research, and also they can make some alterations to the research I've made. Possibilities are there, right? So you make some recommendations as to saying how your research will be helpful for the scholars in future, and what are the other areas you can really suggest related to your area, which can be taken forward in research. So you're making future recommendations for the research to be carried out. And that's how you conclude the paper. Now let's go into drafting the conclusion. What happens is most of the time, when scholars come to this conclusion part, they feel that it's all done. And even it's quite normal, right? We have put in a lot of work. And finally, when we come to the conclusion, there's somewhere that hurry that you just have to finish it and quickly put the findings and be done with it. But you should maintain that passion, as I told you from the beginning. You should carry that energy. That's very important. So ensure that even your conclusion, you finish it well, you finish it strong. So you pay attention to what are the elements that should go in your conclusion chapter, because people will sometime read your abstract alone, will sometime read your conclusion also directly. They might even skip the chapters. So if I'm going to pick up a thesis that is 200 pages, I might pick one or two chapters relevant to my study, or otherwise sometimes I'll just go to the conclusion chapter directly, because I know that's where the researcher would be talking about summarizing the key findings, right? So I'll go there directly. So that is very important, that the conclusion chapters should stand by itself. Although all the chapters will be connected with a common strand of ideas, conclusion chapter should stand by itself, and it should neatly summarize all the key findings and highlight why it's adding value to the existing research. That is your research. Why is it valuable, and how far, what is the scope it has for future research possibilities? So the chapter will conclude by summarizing, and not only that, it will throw light to the research aims and questions, how it's been answered, and how it makes a valuable contribution. And the overall findings have to be discussed in relation to the research aim. Whatever you are studying, whatever you found out is definitely connected to the aim, right? You can't have findings at one place and aims at one place. So, if my research aim is to study something, my findings have to indicate what that has actually happened. So, if you see here, they say study aim to, the results indicate that I aimed at studying how this particular text is operating within this cultural context. So, my results indicated that this culture. So, if you see, it's all connected, both your aims and your findings. And that's what you are going to project in your conclusion chapter. So again, being humble in the sense, what I mean is, you can't make very bold claims like this study proves or this findings disprove. There's nothing to prove and disprove. You have a finding, but remember, this finding can always be questioned, can be, in future, it has chances that people might, take it in another. For example, you would have supported one view, it's good to you, you find it right, and you have given justification. But for another person, for a future scholar, they might take it in another way. The study might go in another way in future. So you don't have to use such statements. You have to be humble, but also be very firm in your finding. That is very important in your argument, in your finding. So make sure that comes out in conclusion, and definitely discuss how your study contributes to the field. That's the whole idea, right? To show how you have made a unique contribution to the existing research. So mention any research outputs created because of this. Probably if you have published any articles or publications in the research, in a thesis, PhD thesis, this is done usually. And also you inform the readers on how your research solves your research problem and what matters, how the gaps have been addressed, and do you study in relation to the theories, what are the theories that you use, and how your research can be applied to real world. For example, if there is any special actions taken, can practitioners take based on your findings. So when it comes to scientific research and all, they come up, maybe they can find a drug or any solution for a particular disease. Yeah, and then it becomes something the real world can actually start using, right? So what is practitioners can think about or things like that will be applicable to science oriented research. And then make a very careful balance between being firm and being humble. Being humble is not saying that no, not saying that this my study is proving or not proving, but being firm is being very cautious to hold on to the findings of your research. That you have to be very firm because you have taken so much of trouble, you have found out something, you're arguing something. Make sure you firmly portray that, and you need to present your arguments with confidence and assert it firmly, and always highlight on how it's contributing to the research that has been made. Make it balanced and make recommendations for future research, that is the scope, what can be done, because there will be some weakness, some difficulties, or some limitations your study would have faced. So be humble to and transparent to talk about that, and also suggest a scope for future scholars to take forward your research. That's a very important step. And then you can finally wrap up your conclusion chapter with a closing summary. So the summary should serve as a quick reference as to what the entire research is about. In 2 lines, if I'm going to ask you your research, what would you say? You can quickly say that there. The very important key points, the takeaways. So this section can be even a paragraph or so, but make it small because you have almost reached towards the end, and you're just reiterating the points that you've made earlier, the findings that you've made earlier. Remember one thing, a good research paper should avoid plagiarism. Plagiarism, as I mentioned, it is a definitely an academic offense. You have a lot of research papers that you will be dealing with in your literature review. So there are chances that you'll be leaning on to a particular, or 3, 4 research papers that are very much aligning to your research aims, and there might be tendencies for you to take a lot of materials or take a lot of sentences and ideas. But remember, that is another person's idea, that's another researcher's idea. You're just probably using it to reflect on your own. So don't use it as it is, but if you have to use it, cite it properly. Citations are very important. We have different citations like MLA, APA, Chicago style. So remember which style of citation that you are going to follow for your entire research paper. This can be done based on the requirements of the journal that you're going to publish. Most of the journals go with APA. Some of them go with MLA 9th edition. So check out that, and you can quickly, you have a lot of online resources that will help you to give you a quick reference as to what this citation is. If you're going to go with this citation, how you have to cite the resources. And sometimes you have the citation generator, which will quickly give you that will help you for your bibliography reference section. And also there are materials that will help you to say how you can go with the in-text citation. What I mean by in-text citation is how I'll quote. If I'm going to exactly take a resource from a research paper, I have to quote it, right? I have to mention the page number, I have to mention the text, the author's name. So how this has to be incorporated within the text will depend on the citation, the practice that you use, whether it's MLA, APA, or Chicago style. So cite sources properly, provide accurate citations. If you don't do that, it will account for plagiarism. Paraphrase and summarize carefully. So if you're going to take some element or some content from another research paper, you reflect on the original idea and you rephrase. You don't just copy paste, or just changing an is or a was or an article doesn't amount to paraphrase, right? What is paraphrasing? You read that particular paragraph and you reflect on it, on your own thoughts. When you do that, you don't copy the original idea as it is. You are reflecting it from your perspective. So that's why paraphrasing is important. And use quotations correctly when you're directly taking another person's work, and develop your own analysis and voice. And this is one of the important skills for a researcher. You do a lot of literature review. That doesn't mean that you are completely relying on these sources. Yes, you are using them, but at the end of it, you are going to come up with your voice, your perspective. Remember the roundtable image that I told you. It's a conference and people are discussing. You can't go there and sit silently and observe. Of course you have to observe. Maybe if one person, remember there are 4 5 people sitting, you go there, you sit, you exactly copy the idea of one person there, and you say it in that conference, you say it in that discussion. How will it be? Can you imagine that situation? Already 5 people are discussing something, you go there, they're expecting you to come up with some thoughts, but you're exactly repeating what one of the person has already been stating in that discussion. Everyone knows you're just blindly copy. You lack knowledge. And that's how plagiarism will put you in. That's how a plagiarized content will look in front of an editor or a reviewer who's going through your paper. So I keep going to that image. That's more of a practical image for me as to how a researcher has to approach a subject. So develop your own critical voice, develop your own analytical voice. And the critical or the analytical voice is one of the important skill, and that comes by constant questioning, not just buying anything comes your way, not just accepting anything, but questioning and curiosity to explore why that thing has to be in your mind. As a researcher, you should carry that why with you. Why this is being asked like this, or why this researcher is talking like this. Why can't it be like that? The more you start probing, the more answers you might end up getting, and the more original content from your side. So have that in mind. Now I have put few phrases that can actually help you out when you are writing your research paper, and which will give the research paper a scholarly value. Of course, there are many academic phrases that if you start going through, but some of it for each chapter that I put here. So the introduction chapter will carry phrases like the significance of the research lies in its contribution to. Right? Here, you're trying to justify what you have found out, investigating the topic, addressing the gap in knowledge. I've highlighted all these phrases, right? This is what, because I would say researchers should develop research language, because when you are doing an academic writing, it's definitely differing from a creative writing or a non-academic writing. Only when you use certain words and phrases like this, you will be communicating that you are an erudite scholar. It's a scholarly writing, right? It's not just a normal piece of writing. It should have extreme academic value only when you use the right phrases. So the research language, you should strengthen your research language. And that will automatically happen if you start reading a lot of research papers. What I do is personally, when I read a lot of research papers, I used to highlight certain phrases which stands out like this. And these are some of it that I have done, that I was able to find out when I still have the materials that I've used for my PhD research. I used to, certain phrases will be like, it really shows that this is done by a scholar. It brings out the scholarliness of the paper. So I used to highlight that. And sometimes I can use it. See, these phrases, you can also use it in your research paper. It won't be plagiarism. It's not an original thought or idea, but it's lovely way of putting certain words together that enhances your language, refines your language. So the study unfolds against the backdrop of a growing interest. Research questions guiding this inquiry, crucial to examine, overarching purpose of the research. Shedding light, throwing light, reviewing. This paper aims to scrutinize. So these are the phrases that would really help you in formulating your chapters. So in literature review, I think you can go through these words, right? This critical examination. Contrary to the mainstream view in the literature, some studies argue that. So you're firmly bringing the arguments that's made. What are the contradictions that's brought in? Critics argue. So all these is brought out, the key concepts, how the study expands, what the study addresses. So in methodology chapters, you can use phrases like the research attempts to generate new insights, the research design that will be employed for the study is, the method is grounded in, the intricacies of the study necessitates a method of exploration, things like that. And finally, in the conclusion chapter, you can talk about the main takeaways from the findings are the data uncovered, unfolded, or revealed, shed light into contradictory findings, then the contradictory patterns, because you are bringing out something new which might be even contradicting the existing literature, existing knowledge. That's completely fine. And that's what a researcher does, right? You don't go with the flow, you go against it. Like all of them are talking about this and they're saying yes to this. This is how the research is gravitating towards. This is how things happen. So the spirit of a researcher is not going with the flow, but going against it and questioning. When you start going against the flow, you will start developing your own voice, and then you'll start developing your own path to the research. And that is where the uniqueness of the research lies upon. So again, here is another phrase which says findings revealed unexpected insights, provoking a reassessment of the current theories, right? Because you are reassessing what is already existing. When you reassess it, when you reapproach it, you come up with something totally different. And that's a great finding that you've made, and that's what contributes to your research value. So now we'll quickly go on as to how to publish the paper in good quality journals. What are the things that we have to really look into? So choosing which journal to publish your research paper is very important. We have a lot of journal databases. As I mentioned, we have Taylor and Francis is very popular for arts. You have, if you type the keyword itself, you will know what journals cover your area of interest. Or generally, if you Google it up itself, it will show you the list of journals. Okay. The whole idea is to first choose the journal because each journal has a requirement. Not all journals will be asking for the exact type of papers. It's better you choose the journal, you visit the journal website, you check the requirements, and then write your paper so that you can have all these things in mind. Sometimes earlier in my research experience, I didn't go and check the journals and I didn't do all that, but I just wrote a paper and I was just checking. Then when I selected a journal, I had to do a lot of revisioning and change few things because I had to align to that journal requirements. Mostly there are certain common requirements. So I was talking about this Times New Roman 1.5 spacing, 12 points, and all these are like formatting which is needed for a research paper, which is sort of very commonly agreed with all the journals. But there are certain requirements. Some journals don't accept subheadings. Some journals ask for these many number of references. Some journals have a template. Their website itself will carry you to a template which will give you an idea as to how to go about that research. So better you have a journal in mind and then align your paper. In case in the journey of getting it done, if you're not getting published in that journal also, you should have 3-4 journals. I would say just don't depend on one journal alone. Just have 3 to 4 journals in mind. Go through all the journals and try pitching in your paper. And maybe you might have to make a little change here and there for each and every journal. Once you make that, you try, because chances are that you might get accepted, or sometimes if you get rejected also, you can have other journals to support you, right? So have 3 to 4 journals, and make sure that they are very good journals, in the sense, beginning, I would suggest my scholars to try out in some journals which are care listed. Maybe they are like good enough when it comes to Indian journals, UGC care listed. And then, of course, the aim is to get published in a Scopus listed journal, because that is what adds high value. A journal with a high impact factor. Impact factor is how many citations happen, how many people use the articles in the journal for their citation. Based on that, the impact factor is given. So people these days are rushing towards getting it done in a good journal, but I would say a good article will definitely, sometimes I would say even I have faced rejections, and I had to do major revisions, but everything is a learning experience. You shouldn't be giving up, but you should keep on trying. And if you work on these little things, that makes your paper successful, it will definitely make a huge impact. And also make sure that you have a working knowledge of what are the journals that really that you can really target for your research. Sometimes there are general journals that, for example, in literature, you see there are certain journals which will accept any topic related to literature. They are open with it. But there are certain journals which only focus on subtopics. For example, they focus only on women's writing, or they focus only on Dalit writing, or they focus only on Indian writing or American writing. So the lot of genres are there. So either if it's completely open to literature, I can send any paper. But if it's only focusing on certain genres, then I have to be careful, because they don't accept anything. But sometimes there is special issue edition where they'll call out for papers saying that this time we are calling out only this theme. So that's theme related. So then you can check out if your paper aligns with the theme. But generally, you will have a journal, couple of journals which will cater to your paper, the research area of yours. So be very well versed with that, and then start pitching in your paper. So choosing the journal is very important, and that's going to make a big difference. So when you choose, you can always discuss it with your mentors, with your fellow scholars and academicians who have had earlier experiences in publishing, or they know about that particular publisher. They'll be able to throw light on the journey that might take you to into that paper, or they might give any valuable feedback. You can take it. So take your time to consider your options. Again, have 3-4 journals journals in mind, so that even if you're not accepted in one, you can always try the other. In case if it's not accepted, again, you need to go through, make revisions and make it more better. And every time you make it better, the chances are high that it gets published. And analyze each aspect of the journal submission, like from shortlisting the titles to the method of publication. So choosing the journal before you start, it helps a lot to build on your research, and it kind of gives you clarity as to where this research paper will land in. And also you can see that there is specific format. As I told you, every journal has a separate template, but mostly if you see that abstract, introduction, this is something that will normally be there for any journal, the outline that we saw. But here and there changes will be there, and the templates and the way you have to format and all, you can check in the website and adhere to the guidelines accordingly. So thorough research regarding to choosing the best journal, once that's done, there'll be large number of journals. For literature, for example, many journals are there, but you need to zero down, you need to narrow down and have a list, prepare the list. And if you're already familiar with certain journals, you can go through that and look at the journals first which are published in this particular website. So for example, if I have a particular website, I know this journal website publishes materials, articles related to my research. What I can do is, if I'm in doubt whether it will publish my research article, I can go through previously published articles there. We will have the archives, and if it's open access, you'll be able to read the entire paper. Otherwise, if it's hid beyond a paywall, you won't be able to read more than the abstract. It will start asking you to log in through an institutional ID. Only if your institution has subscribed to it, you'll be able to read the entire paper, or you'll be asked to purchase that paper for some dollars. It's going to be a Scopus listed. But there is this website called Ski Hub, which will help you to, if you copy paste the DOI, mostly papers are available in that. I can even show you, like maybe today or tomorrow, as to how you can use that software tool to unlock the DOI and try to access the paper. Unless it's very recent, or very some of the papers are having exceptions, but otherwise mostly you would be able to access the PDF format of that paper using Ski Hub. So a lot of AI driven research is happening, and you have access to most of the papers. If they are open access, it's well and good. So also your libraries will give you option into some of the journals which are published in print. That also can be of good help. So think about this, do your field work, I will say, before you go and find out. Search your library, see if there is any published journals that's there. For example, in literature, there's something called Indian Literature, published by Sahitya Academy. It's a very well-renowned journal, but it comes only in print. So you can try sending your papers, like whoever is from literature background, because yesterday I had a scholar asking me questions. I'm just saying this. So you can also use Google Scholar to see which journals have published specific subjects related to your research area. Again, connect with supervisors, librarians, and colleagues to understand which journal. After you make like 3 to 4 choices, you can test your choice, like how you could do with your topic selection, right? Go into a discussion, because people might know something, and there might be people who have already published in that journal. They'll really able to guide you. They'll be able to tell you what to do and what not to do. And also, if you are speaking to your mentors, fellow academicians, you can ask questions like which journals they read regularly, which ones are most respected. We would want to publish in a good journal. So obviously, if it's a Scopus or Web of Science indexed, it is definitely a good journal. So and you can gather the experiences from them, and based on the answers that you get, based on the experiences and the feedback that they share with you, you can narrow down on your selection list. And also, the next thing that you do is search for call for papers. Sometimes mostly journals are open throughout the year for general submissions, but sometimes journal will promote a particular theme. I was talking about this earlier, right? So for example, throughout the year they're open, but one particular part they might come up with a CFP, we call it as call for papers. They will say that we are promoting this particular theme. Maybe we're talking about gender or culture, and you need to submit papers only related to this. So that time you can see if you have a paper already. So I will say you can work on one. If you finish one paper, you start pitching in with the journals. You start sending it to the journal. Simultaneously, also start working on another paper in another topic or another subtopic of an area, so that you will have varied options to send your papers to. So that's one thing that you can really focus on. And then also look into the aims and scopes of the journal. So when you go to any journal's website, you will have certain aims and scopes. So within the aims and scopes, you will know
what are the key areas the journals covered, and see if your research aligns with that. Who will be the potential audience for the journal and the purpose of the journal. So understanding the audience is very important, whether it's a general interest journal, which whether it will reach a wide readership, or it's a specialist journal. It's going to just focus on one particular research element alone, or whether it's an international journal, because if your research is region specific, will it still have value in an international journal? Think about all this, and also be thorough with journals policies and procedures. So there's a peer review policy. How many reviewers will handle your papers? Are you okay with that? How much time it might take? All this would be put into the journal's website, which you can go through. And how is the submission process done? Whether you should mail your papers. Mostly these days, it's like you have a submittable account, you have a manuscript management account where you'll have to register in the journal website and then start submitting your paper. So there's a guided process in which you can do that. Mostly for Scopus Index journals, it's like that. So make sure you're familiar with the editorial policies. You will be asked to read the editorial policies, which will give you an idea as to how your paper will be reviewed. And you want to publish in open access, you feel that anyone can read your whole paper, you're okay with that? Yes. Otherwise, then this is a payment thing that comes where if your paper is selected, not all of them will be able to access it unless they pay some amount or have an institutional login. So all these things you have to be quite clear. So also you need to understand what the editor of your journal will be looking for. For understanding this, it's better you read the papers that's already been published from the journal. You'll understand the standard. And also there is this instruction for authors. It's given, right? For every journal website, there will be instruction what the authors have to follow. So ensure that is done. You go through the instructions, familiarize yourself with the guidelines, and also go through the journal's editorial board. You see the editorial board members. You will know their expertise. You will know what they will, from which background they are, from which academic background they are. So you know what is expected out of your journal. So it's very important you perform a thorough search for your target journal and take time to read the articles in the journal where you'll be able to access them. Maybe download a few articles and read. And once you are done with this, your paper is ready. Also check the template that they mention. There's a certain template for instructions, a certain template that has to be followed while you're formatting your article. You can download the template and make sure you follow that. And also make sure you're aware of the editorial policies before you submit. Now let's quickly go to the editing part of the paper. Before you send the paper, it's important that you do a lot of editing from your side. Editing is nothing but once again evaluating and making changes to your paper before submitting it to your target journal, right? So you're checking whether your paper is, everything is in place, because this is very important in case if there's going to be a typo, in case if you're going to miss out something, you should be checking that properly. You can go through it once again. That's very important. And in benefits of editing, it ensures that your paper is well rounded and it's presentable to the reader. Not only just the reader, your peer reviewer process will happen smoothly if you're able to identify any mistakes or any thing that you missed out on the paper, or anything you feel has not been given proper attention to, whether the arguments are having enough strength, whether the discussions are made intellectually. So remember, think yourself as an scrutinizer on an editor. I used to do that for my paper. I'll be like, all that's little difficult. It's your paper. You don't want to keep on finding mistakes. Very psychologically, you will only want to feel happy reading that. You might feel bit better, or there's this pride that yes, it's my paper. But try to detach yourself from the paper and try to read it with the third eye and see what is really missing, or where is it lacking, or anything that can be done to improve the paper. So the effectiveness of your writing style, the clarity of your work, all this has to be judged. And then types of editing, we have content editing, copy editing, we have line editing. Content editing is checking the organization and presentation. Does the paper make sense? Does it have a good flow? Whether the arguments are clearly developed and communicated and any logical gaps are there. Copy editing focuses on grammar, spelling, and punctuation. Line editing is to check line by line. You go through the research paper, the choices, and what you've made, the impact, if the writing is really making an impact. And is there any clarity in any way you can simplify your writing if it's going to take any complex terminologies? So this is line by line editing. So self-editing, yes, this is what I was talking about. When you prepare your article, it's a draft for you. When you go through it, make sure you read it many times so that, you come up with clear sentences and paragraphs. The more you keep revisiting, the more it becomes better. Take a break in the sense, if you're continuously engaging in the paper, like, just give some break, maybe after a week or something, again, visit the paper so that you will see it with a fresh eye and a fresh perspective if anything is coming up, which is not setting right with the paper. And then always be mindful of the structure, pay attention to the organization, the flow and structure, which is very important. And then grammar and punctuation, you need to have an eye on that because those are basics, you can't get it wrong. So also make sure your tone is flowing properly, there is coherence, cohesiveness, all these things from one part to the other, it keeps flowing without any disconnection, I would say. Think like a reviewer. I mean, imagine yourself as a reviewer and an editor, and then read the paper so that you will do your best to read it properly and don't miss out on any mistakes. And also, if possible, you can make anyone else, if you're an expert or any fellow academicians who are experts in the field, you can, or who are good in, language skills, can help you to read the paper. They might just catch the errors quickly and let you know. So this can also happen. Yeah. With this, I'm stopping. I mean, I am done with the second day's lecture. Tomorrow, I will be showing you a sample research paper, and probably I'll also take you to a couple of journal websites to show you how you can, check the aim scopes and get an idea of what the paper, how the paper can be pitched in, and what actually the journal expects. Whatever I was talking about today, we can just go through the website and check that also. So with that, I stop and you can ask your questions if you have any.
Hello, ma'am, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I think there are a few
Ma'am, I have a
questions.
small query. Yeah, the same
Yeah,
question I am repeating it here, ma'am.
is it in the
Actually,
chat
when
box?
you
Yeah.
yes, ma'am, it is in the chat box also. So I thought let me speak to you.
Yeah,
My
please
question
go ahead.
is it necessary to have statistical tools for qualitative research also?
Qualitative, it depends. See, sometimes in linguistics and all, they use statistical tools. See, though linguistics is literature related, but still they use. If need arises, you can, and that's where the mixed method comes in, right? So if you think it's going to do good,
Mm-hmm.
you can please go ahead with that. And someone was asking me some name. One second. Repeat the names of the sites. Unlocking the. Yeah, that's Ski Hub. That's right, ma'am. Book in. See, how to write a book chapter. Book chapter is also like a research paper. Probably it will not have an abstract as such. You won't have an abstract because it's not a research paper that will stand by itself. So that's one thing. See, research paper and research article. So the difference between research paper. So for example, I would call everything a research paper, not a research article. Research article will focus a lot on the literature review part, what has been done already. It's more on what has been done. Although your research paper will also talk about that, but your research paper will have a strong focus on your research findings. Research article is maybe the sources that you are using for your research paper. But research paper is something that completely works on a new finding, completely works on a research problem.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
Yeah, we're actually running out of time, but there's quite a lot to cover up today.
Roshni, you can
Yes,
proceed,
sir.
ma'am. Yeah.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Roshni from first year MCOM, and I'm honored to deliver the vote of thanks for today's session. Today, we have been enlightened with valuable knowledge and recognized journals, research papers, and publishing. It was a wonderful session, and we are extremely grateful for the insightful information shared. On behalf of St. Teresa Degree College, I extend my heartfelt thanks to our resource person, Dr. N. Safreen Ma'am, for providing such an enriching session. Your expertise has given us a deeper understanding of the topic. Thank you, ma'am. I would also
Thank
like to
you.
thank our principal, the organizing committee, and our faculty members for their continuous support and hard work in making this event possible. A special thanks to Mr. Lakshmi ma'am and Mr. Atul sir from SEMS Welfare Foundation for her guidance and assistance throughout. Finally, I would like to thank all the participants for their engagement and enthusiasm. We hope this session has helped and enhanced your knowledge on research and publication. Once again, thank you to everyone who made this event a success. We look forward to meeting you all again tomorrow. Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you, ma'am.